Now, I'm assuming since you clicked on this video, you have a basic understanding of what esports are, but a few of you may be wondering, wait, collegiate esports? What's that? Well, let me briefly enlighten you. College esports is a term that was coined way back in 2009 in the States and refers to esports as a competition being officially supported as a career by a tertiary education provider. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, essentially, similar to traditional collegiate sports, you have talented students who are attending a post-secondary educational institution represent that institution that also play in a league against other post-secondary schools. So that's the definition of collegiate esports. But let's talk about them a bit. You may not know this, but I'm actually from Canada. And up here, our collegiate esports scene is a little bit different from the US, so I'm going to talk about that first. Now, when I say different, in a lot of ways, I do kind of mean inferior. When looking at the Canadian collegiate esports scene, there are certainly a few universities and colleges that have esports teams. Unfortunately, in reality, there are really only less than a handful of schools in Canada that are treating their esports scene and program as seriously as their traditional collegiate sports programs. And although there are a few, there is one collegiate esports program that I want to talk about in Canada that's really going above and beyond in terms of pushing the boundaries of the esports scene within the collegiate space in Canada. And that is the Collegiate Esports program over at Saint Clair College. Apart from just having a collegiate esports team, Saint Clair College brings a lot more to the table. One of their first big offers being student scholarships, meaning you can actually play your way through the college experience by being good at a video game. On top of this, they provide a numerous amount of amenities for their esports players with their own training facilities. And by that, I don't just mean like a closet with a PC in it. Their esports facility includes 64 gaming PCs, dedicated training facility rooms for the varsity teams, a 6v6 competition stage, esports classrooms with a broadcast studio and like the latest industry equipment. It's got 3 dedicated VR spaces connected to the broadcast studio and also 5 separate soundproof streaming rooms. So they're really dedicated to creating an esports facility for their students. Now I know I'm singing their praises a lot and it's sounding a little bit like an ad, but compared to other educational institutions are doing right now in terms of putting resources into the esports scene for their collegiate players, I felt it was important just to show how far ahead of the game that Saint Clair College is in terms of investing in their esports collegiate space. And this is something that most major educational institutions are not doing right now, despite having significantly more financial backing than, say, Saint Clair College. And then you take a look across the border at the collegiate esports scene in the US, and you can't help but think that Canada is dramatically behind the 8 ball here when it comes to collegiate esports. So why is this? In my mind, there's one really glaring problem, and I think I got a pretty good way to illustrate it to you. When looking at collegiate esports, it's important to understand that oftentimes the collegiate esports are going to be managed by the sports administration at the school, which means that oftentimes the collegiate esport will in part scale with the size of the sports administration at the school. So let's compare US versus Canadian collegiate sports, shall we? Alright, with all this talk of school, I think it's time for a pop quiz. I think it'll be pretty easy, but I'm going to show you 2 pictures. One is going to be of United States college football, and the other is going to be Canadian college football, and you're going to tell me which one is which. Alright, ready? Here they are. Pretty obvious, right? Yeah. Well, sorta. You see, the one on the left is college football in the States, but the one on the right is also football in the States. That's just high school football in the States. So then we compare that to actual Canadian collegiate football and just look at the difference. Yeah, pretty insane, right? And that's the University of Toronto. And it arguably has one of the larger sports administrations in the country in terms of collegiate sports. And despite this, they're still smaller than some high school sports in the States. And in my mind, that's the biggest problem. The gap in collegiate sports administration in Canada in comparison to the US is titanic, with most students who are serious about their sport opting to go to the States to play for those schools as opposed to Canadian schools. And you can't blame them. The eyes are there. The money is there. The potential to transition into a pro career is also there. Whether it be the NFL or NBA, the pro teams are looking to the post-secondary schools like the NCAA to find their next pro players. And that just doesn't happen in Canada because we don't have that system in place. Now, it's not all doom and gloom for esports. As you probably know, esports have a lot of key differences from traditional sports. And that's where we start to see the commonalities between Canada and the US. Whether it's in the States or in Canada, if you're playing esports collegiately, there really is no overarching governing body like the NCAA. I mean, really, on the collegiate level, whether it's teams, games, leagues, is all relatively fragmented in terms of who's running what, where, and when. And not to say there aren't some governing bodies like Riot Games, NACC, or the NACE, but there really is nothing comparable to, say, something like the NCAA for the college sports. And as of right now, it still feels like the esports scene in the collegiate space is very grassroots in nature. If Collegiate Esports is able to get itself a governing body that genuinely cares about the growth of collegiate esports and esports in general, it will have massive impacts on the esports scene as a whole going forward into its future. Having recognized collegiate and even high school esports leagues would only further legitimize esports as a legitimate path to go down for many talented young gamers and their parents to better understand that, hey, this is a path that can be taken and can see a lot of success. And if we do see that kind of infrastructure take root, we do potentially set ourselves up for something very similar to that NCAA student collegiate pipeline, where you get students in high school who are esports athletes that find themselves in a collegiate esports program and then eventually end up going into a pro esports scene. That would be really cool to see, and it's something I hope we see in the future. But those are my thoughts on the collegiate esports scene. What do you think? Do you think collegiate esports are important to the growth of the esports industry as a whole? Why or why not? Let me know in the comments section. And as always, thanks for watching.